Blade Runner. Just pronouncing the name of this film brings a mixture of emotions in my brain that are difficult to describe. Blade Runner, the film that made me discover how deep the art that is filmmaking could go for the very first time in my life. Blade Runner, the movie that developed an interest and fascination for philosophy in me, and the way I think, therefore the kind of person I am. Blade Runner, the epitome of neo-noir and the science fiction genre. Blade Runner. The film Blade Runner was originally released in 1982, directed by now famous director Ridley Scott, starring the legendary Harrison Ford and incredibly underrated actors Roger Howard, Sean Young, Daryl Hannah, Joe Turkel, amongst many others. Loosely based on Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, a novel written by science fiction visionary Philip K. Dick. The movie is set in a dystopian future with extremely advanced technology, taking place in Los Angeles, and it tells the story of a man named Rick Deckard, who must hunt down 6 androids, known as replicants, who escaped from their masters in other planets and sneaked into Earth. Returning to his former profession as a Blade Runner, a bounty hunter-like detective that retires any replicant illegally residing on Earth. Now, before I actually talk about the movie, it's rather difficult to talk about Blade Runner without first specify which of the 5 different versions that have been released as of 2017. Normally one should only judge the theatrical version, which is usually the original, from a critical standpoint, since re-releases and special editions are generally extra material for fans of the film that have the home video. However, Blade Runner is actually one of those films that suffered from the intervention of producers, who feared the audiences would not be able to understand the plot and the many concepts of the futuristic world depicted in the film.
The rough cutting was finished. Blade Runner was test screened in front of audiences to see how they'd react to Scott's dark fantasy. The results of those early tests were even more disturbing than the film itself.
I mean, they've said it looks amazing, but what the hell's going on? And that's when all the panic really set in.
We all were just destroyed. I mean, Ridley sat there just like he'd been hit on the head with a baseball bat, and I did too.
Thus, they forced a perspective-changing factor into the film against basically everyone involved. A detective diary-like monologue by Harrison Ford, or a voiceover if you prefer, that basically explains what is happening to the audience every time something that moves the story forward occurs, the usage of the futuristic technology, and or how they came to be. This sounds like a good idea to help the audiences that know nothing about science fiction understand the film, but actually is completely pointless. From a cinematic point of view, it's completely unnecessary because Blade Runner excels at visual storytelling. The original script, as well as the actual dialogue delivered by the actors, never uses or needs any kind of exposition, and if you pay attention to the characters' actions, you can understand the situation perfectly and guess the rest as the film continues. From an artistic point of view, it cripples the film, because the voiceover oftenly breaks the tone, of many scenes and interrupts the atmosphere and focus on subtle and silent moments that need no words whatsoever.
Decker. The report would be routine retirement of a replicant, which didn't make me feel any better about shooting a woman in the back. There it was again. Feeling in myself. For her. For Rachel.
Especially when at some points you are basically told how to feel instead of letting you experience the moment.
And right as I'm it's like having sex and somebody dumps cold water on you. Right at that moment where I'm like at my emotional crescendo as a viewer, here comes this thudding, dunderheaded voiceover.
I don't know why he saved my life. Maybe in those last moments he loved life more than he ever had before.
Maybe I guess in those last moments he appreciated life more than ever before. Yes, I know that. Thank you. Thank you for kicking this beautiful, delicate, emotional note that we were achieving right in the nuts.
And from a critical point of view, it really hurts the experience because the dialogue of the voiceover is really cliched and bad. Not to mention, it lasts longer than what it needs and comes back more often than what it should. As a matter of fact, Harrison Ford was forced to record it. He hated the script for the narration so much that you can feel his frustration all the way through. As a result, his line delivery in the voiceover is also not very good. Quite a shame, since the actual physical performances in the film are all fantastic.
I was there when Harrison did it, and it was just horrendous. It was like a sort of what Ridley calls Irving the Explainer, you know, my name is Deckard and I am an android catcher, and, you know, and Harrison hated it so much that he did it really, really badly, hoping they wouldn't use it, and they did.
There are also many other differences between each version released since the theatrical version, like a couple of scenes that were either shortened or prolonged or cut out altogether. Violence and nudity censored, but ironically completely normal dialogue substituted with swearing, which is nowhere to be found in the original script and is completely out of character.
What seems to be the problem? Death. Death. Well, I'm afraid that's a little out of my jurisdiction.
I want more life, Father. I want more life, fucker.
To show how much every cut cheapens or improves the experience, let's take a look at Roger Ebert's website. He wrote a review for 3 different versions of the film, gave 3 stars to the 1982 theatrical cut, 3.5 for the director's cut, but gave the final cut a perfect score, and included it in his personal list of great movies. Like Ebert, I do have to say the theatrical cut is the inferior version, and most of the other editions don't really improve that much. Even the director's cut is not really the director's cut, since Ridley Scott had nothing to do with it. The most recent 1 hour and 57-minute long final cut is, in my opinion, the superior version, and the only one depicting the original vision of the story in the best way. Of course, I realize that many people enjoy more the 1982 version with the voiceover, which is fine. If you enjoy it, then good for you. All the things I'm about to say are of course based only on my personal opinion. Personally, I love this movie so goddamn much that I have seen almost every single version there is, and rewatched my personal favorite versions many times. So I believe it's pointless to keep debating which version is the best. That's more like a personal experience that will stay with you for your own personal reasons. I like more the silent moments of the film, the kind of cinema that lets you think for yourself and allows you the space to do so. That's the kind of cinema I like the most. That's the kind of thing that keeps movie lovers like me coming back to some other genres that sadly do not exist anymore, like German Expressionism. That is the art of silence. That's the kind of thing that makes you come back to give your own interpretation on the subtleness many movies are capable of presenting. Just little scenes of imagery and movement that are filled with human emotion. When it comes to visual effects in the entire history of film, there are only a fistful of movies that can successfully survive the pass of time and still be as impressive with their artistic style as they were when originally released. Blade Runner is quite simply absolutely perfect. The movie reaches such a level of visual perfection that it's a safe thing to say it not only reaches but also surpasses the beauty of most movies released today, even the ones with a similar artistic design. Literally every single trick in the book was used and exploited to create one of the most stunning looking places in the entire history of cinema.
What you're really looking at in the Hades landscape is what we call a forced perspective miniature. A building in the foreground might have been a foot tall, a building midway back might have been 4 inches tall, and a building at the far distance might have been 1 inch tall, but that whole distance from foreground to background would be about 8 feet. It was very quick to make, and then thousands of tiny fiber optic bundles coming up through the bottom of the floor and into those buildings to light them up. Once you have that all in place with the lights and the buildings and the fiber optics, we filled that room with so much smoke that you couldn't see from here to the wall.
It was left to me to go in with a few of my key people, and he and his friend to go down and sit in the screening room, and he said very little, and I said roll it, and it went dark. The 10 minutes of optical takes ran, the lights came up. Philip turned around, looked me right in the eyes, and he says, "How is this possible? I don't understand this." He says, "This feels exactly like what I had in my head when I was writing it. How does this happen?" At that moment, it was probably the best moment in my career because I said, we nailed it, we got it.
Ridley Scott is an absolute perfectionist when it comes to the visuals in his movies, not just because of the overall presentation and eye candy the film can offer, but also because he wants to create a world, a universe with its own working society, its unique logic and reason to be the way it is. And to this day, when you think of a dystopian future, you think of Blade Runner's obscure, decaying and dreamlike city. When you think of thought-provoking science fiction films that involve somehow artificial intelligence or artificial life, it was most likely inspired by Blade Runner's deep philosophical themes. The city of Los Angeles depicted in the film is not just a fabrication made to tell a story, it's a living organism, a moving, breathing and crying place that quickly invites the viewer to submerge inside its dark, melancholic corners. Blade Runner also has one of the best scores ever created, made by the one and only Greek composer Evangelos Odysseas Papathanassiou, better known artistically simply as Vangelis. The music in the entire film matches perfectly with the imagery presented in every single scene whenever it plays. In film, the music is the soul of a movie. It's the one thing that characterizes the most the things that we are supposed to feel. The soundtrack for Blade Runner has a feel of sorrow and melancholy, but also is so unbelievably beautiful. I felt like I was witnessing a world never seen before, a vision from the future so very distant, yet so familiar. And that's what it makes it so perfect. It fits the gloomy, obscure and beautiful themes of the story and fills it with sad feelings. And now that we talk about the narration, let's talk about the reason it was created in the first place, which is the universe in which the movie takes place. Blade Runner is unique in the sense that it's so rich with its universe and the way it works, and its complexity. Its creator, Philip K. Dick, was a true visionary when it came to the cleverness of the world and the places he created in his stories. The easiest thing to note is how the city seems to be always covered in darkness, even during daytime. This is something barely explored in the movie, even with the voiceover, but turns out the movie takes place after a nuclear war, known as World War Terminus, which is the story's equivalent of World War III. It's never specified what the causes of the war were, but it's mentioned that the war ended many years ago. In the movie, however, we yet to see the consequences. The constant usage of nuclear weaponry have made drastic climatic changes that explain the persistent and constant rain. At some point, it's even suggested that there is a radioactive cape surrounding the planet. Most humans have gotten used to it since it's not enough to hurt them, but has since then been the cause of many strange diseases. In the movie, there's a character named Sebastian, who suffers from a very strange illness that drastically accelerates his aging.
How old are you?
25.
What's your problem?
Methuselah syndrome.
What's that?
My glands, they grow old too fast.
Is that why you're still on Earth?
Yeah. I couldn't pass the medical.
Also, animals are virtually extinct in the universe of Blade Runner. The novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is in fact named like that because Deckard owns an android sheep. Authentic real animals have become so rare that they reached an abysmal price in the market.
Is this a real snake?
Of course it's not real. Think I'd be working in a place like this if I could afford a real snake?
The city in the movie also has a very mixed society with cultures from all around the world, most prominently from Asian countries like China and Japan. This is a very smart prediction for the movie to make, because in modern day and age, most of the things that are American are made in China. And to this day, these two countries are the only ones with markets big enough to compete, benefit and negotiate with each other. So it's only natural that many cultures will eventually meet together at some point. In America, multiculturalism is a very common thing. There are many neighborhoods in many different states that are almost completely composed by immigrants, descendants of immigrants, or different cultures. So what we see in the film is simply a much bigger version of this phenomenon. Using these elements to his advantage, Edward James Olmos, who plays Gaff in the movie, came up with an idea that will later become one of the most iconic elements in the entire Blade Runner world: the city's peak, an amalgamation of many different languages composed mainly by Japanese, Spanish, French, German, Hungarian, and Korean. The structure of the language is never specified in the film, because it's a street language that has the objective of combining common words from different languages into the same phrase, so that people that cannot speak other languages can still understand and be part of the conversation.
Pal?
Lofa, Nekojima, te vaya Blade Runner. He say you Blade Runner.
Tell him I'm eating.
One of the few things that can be criticized about the world building is the year mentioned. Since we have already reached that decade, we can easily point out how the world is not quite like that yet. But if you ask me, this is not important. Science fiction is about imagining the future, taking all the ambition of humanity to evolve, and adapting it, giving it as much sense as you possibly can. When science fiction author and real-life scientist Isaac Asimov saw Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, he was so impressed by the special effects in the film that he wrote an essay praising especially the design of the technology presented in the movie, but also thinking, we'll have something similar in the future, but inferior. And he was absolutely right. This can be also applied to Blade Runner and many other science fiction films that have the same level of ambition. Every single piece of technology presented in the movie has already been a subject of research. The flying cars that have been a subject of research for years. It's just that nobody has come up with a practical and safe way to use them. The photos in the enhancing machine that are so reminiscent of today's satellite photographies. The multiculturalism and the evolution of pop culture. The giant buildings that reach the skies and hold thousands of rooms, yet they are placed right next to the slums where people can barely survive. Is one of the most impressive visual storytelling I have ever seen. It's so daring with how ambitious it is, and so perfect with the details it has. For the lack of better words, is magnificent.
If only you could see what I've seen with your eyes.
Since they lack emotion, humanity and empathy for life, androids are slaves and have no rights. To make them easy to control, they are conceived with fabricated memories and given false photos to match the memories, making them think they are human and not letting them realize that they are being manipulated. Their mother companies and their masters send them to colonies in another planet. Some of them are forced to work, some of them are forced to fight, some of them are forced to please humans. Sometimes some of them discover they are androids, but to avoid what could possibly be a threat, the companies that create them have only given him 4 years of life. To make his duty easier, Deckard uses the Void Camp, a machine that applies an empathy test. Since androids have no empathy for the suffering of others, the machine should be able to trigger an emotional response that tells the interviewer that the person right in front of him might be an android that doesn't know he's an android, or an android posing as a human. When Deckard uses the machine on Rachel by the order of Tyrell, it's revealed that she is an android. Later on, she visits Deckard's department to be convinced of the truth. Since Tyrell told Deckard what memories were implanted into her, he is capable of describing exactly what she remembers.
You remember the spider that lived in a bush outside your window? Orange body, green legs? Watched her build a web all summer. Then one day there's a big egg in it. The egg hatched.
The egg hatched,
And?
and 100 baby spiders came out. And they ate her.
Implants. Those aren't your memories. They're somebody else's. They're Tyrell's nieces.
She breaks, even though androids are not supposed to have emotions. In that moment, Deckard develops a fascination for Rachel, because she presented herself as a cold, heartless businesswoman, yet she is fragile and sensitive. He has destroyed her life by revealing the horrible truth, and he questions just what exactly is the Void Camp detecting, and how effective it truly is. Blade Runner is so rich with its storytelling, with its subtlety, and with its symbolism. And the casting was just perfect. The actors just keep adding and adding things to their characters that make them more compelling, more interesting, and deeper. When Deckard tracks down Sora's artificial snake, he chases her down, and in that scene, Deckard truly represents death, the one thing the androids are so afraid of. It's an innocent life form, running away from death in a world that is indifferent to their suffering. After shooting her in the back, he feels grief because he understands he just killed a beautiful woman that was truly innocent. While having very little screen time and almost no dialogue, the character of Sebastian is also very important. He was classified as a defective, and for that he is miserable. He crafted dozens of toys with basic artificial intelligence, and all of them are humanoids, because he wants someone to keep him company. He is the very representation of solitude. And when he sees the androids, he sees something perfect, something that he cannot possibly be. He doesn't see a machine that can be enslaved. He sees something beautiful, and for that the androids want him as a friend. With Sebastian they feel safe, and since they have never experienced childhood and are only a couple of years old, they are playful and friendly, like a child. Leon Kowalski was the only one that hadn't developed a personality of his own, since he was the youngest of the androids, and had only recently discovered he was an android. So when he tries to kill Deckard, it's merely on self-defense, because he knows Deckard will try to retire him later eventually. But Deckard is saved by Rachel, who shoots Leon. Then at his apartment, they start to get very close. And the romance is actually believable, because these two characters obviously feel a fascination for each other. They are so different, yet so similar. Rachel has never experienced love, and she shouldn't be able to. So when she actually does, it's something frightening to her, yet is also inviting. It's a great scene because you can understand everything that is happening between these two characters and why it happens. Yet it has no dialogue. You only focus in the emotion the actors are expressing with their movement. Another great character is the Dr. Eldon Tyrell. He owns the gigantic corporation that creates the androids, meaning he's the one that has defined every aspect of their existence itself, like a god that can mold their destiny to fit his every whim, because he feels like the rightful owner of the life he has created. His enormous building was designed after the Pyramid of the Sun, which was dedicated to a god. Even his chamber was made to resemble the room of the pontificates of Rome. Tyrell believed nobody could surpass his intellect. He will maintain a chess game with people like Sebastian for days, giving them very long times to make their move because he knew no one could beat him. And his corporation is so powerful his room was completely protected to make him unreachable. When Roy Batty finally finds him and demonstrates he can challenge his intelligence, he lets him pass simply because he wishes to meet him.
On your mind, Sebastian? What are you thinking about?
Bishop to King 7. Checkmate.
Bishop to King 7, checkmate, I think.
Got a brainstorm, huh, Sebastian? Milk and cookies kept you awake, huh?
Let's discuss this. You better come up, Sebastian.
He isn't interested in Roy's wishes. He simply wasn't impressed by all the things he did to reach him. He survived off-world combat, traveled back to Earth, and remained hidden. But Tyrell is like an artist beholding a work of art, a product of his brilliance. Roy and his comrades were given a taste of life, and then it was taken away. That's why he can't let him live no more. And a mixture of feelings invade him, hatred towards his cruelty, but sadness for losing the closest thing to a father he will ever have, and guilt for taking his life. Deckard then tracks down Sebastian's apartment. And to take him by surprise, Priest pretends to be one of Sebastian's robot toys. It's a symbolic scene to show you how Deckard is unable to tell her apart from an unanimated object for being an android. They struggle for some time, and you can see the despairing Priest because she fights for her life. And then she's writhing in pain and fear because she knows everything she and Roy did was in vain and she's going to die before he comes back. It's a truly horrifying scene. The movie even makes you hate the protagonist a little bit because he's doing something so horrible. And maybe that was the reason he was broken in the first place and wanted to stop being a Blade Runner. Roy arrives to witness the one he loves lying dead. He lets Deckard know how strong he is and then gives him a couple of seconds to run away and prepare for a duel. But what he wanted was a moment to cry his loss. And since animals are almost extinct and he has never seen a wolf, this means Roy is instinctively howling to express his sadness. Even though his time is running out, he completely obliterates Deckard, who is pushed towards the rooftop. At this moment, Deckard is completely fragile and defenseless. It could have been easy to kill him or to let him die, and yet, even though Deckard killed his friends and the one he loved, Roy saves him. After being afraid of death, Roy doesn't want to see another life end. He holds a dove, not caring what it's made of, because he wanted to feel the touch of life one last time before it leaves him forever. If empathy is what ultimately defines a real human being, then the difference between humans and androids has vanished. Blade Runner has the protagonist constantly asking who is human and who is an android, and what definitely separates them. But also possesses one of the biggest mysteries in cinema history, which comes in the form of a question. Is Rick Deckard himself a human, or is he an android? The obvious answer will be simply assuming he is a human, considering he is clearly a human in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. However, Blade Runner is very loosely based on Philip K. Dick's classic novel, character-wise at least. Some characters who play a major role in the film barely have any importance in the novel. And there are characters in the novel that were completely removed in the movie, not to mention the gigantic changes many characters have. So the novel is not really relevant when it comes to this mystery presented only in the film. Also, this seems like a theory that comes out of nowhere. But if you look for them, you'll find many things that make the theory more plausible. Every android is implanted with artificial memories with the purpose of making them believe they are human, so they will be more efficient and easier to control. And fabricated photographies based on those artificial memories are given to them. Leon Kowalski, who only recently discovered he was an android, was trying to recover his photographies, most likely because he still felt attached to the memories in his head. When Rachel discovered her life memories were false, she was so broken she didn't want to believe it. In the voiceover, Deckard himself mentions he retired from being a Blade Runner and how he used to live with his ex-wife. However, these are all things he only mentions, things we never see. And just like the androids, Deckard only has Polaroids to prove the veracity of his past and his ex-wife's existence, so he might also be convinced he is a human, because of his implanted memories. The androids in the film have all artificial eyeballs, and at many points they emit a very specific glow. I found very hard to believe this was unintentional, but there is a short scene in which Deckard is in his apartment with Rachel for the second time. For a moment he walks behind her. He's out of focus looking at Rachel, but if you look closely, you can see the same glow slowly appear in his eyes. Another thing also worth noting is how the androids have superhuman strength. And since Deckard is very easily overpowered by the androids, this means he doesn't have superhuman strength and therefore is not an android. However, it was established from the beginning that the androids belong to the Netsu Seed series, that have superior intelligence, superior strength, and a very specific 4-year lifespan. Also, since Rachel is confirmed an android, and she doesn't have superhuman strength, this isn't a valid point to prove Deckard is human. If anything, this could mean that Rachel and Deckard belong to a different series of androids that have different characteristics and a different purpose. Eduardo Gaff, who is a veteran Blade Runner, is the man sent by the LAPD to find Deckard and bring him to Bryant. Apparently, Gaff's purpose is to make sure Deckard fulfills his duty as Blade Runner and retires all the androids, which raises questions. Why Gaff doesn't kill the androids himself? Why must he only send one man after the androids if they have proven to be extremely dangerous? Could it be that Gaff's mission is to watch over Deckard to make sure he fulfills his purpose as an android? And he was the only one sent after the replicants because, being an artificial lifeform, both Tyrell and the LAPD consider him an expendable resource. Gaff also seems to know everything about him, to the point of predicting the way he feels or the attitude he's more likely to adopt. At many points of the story, Gaff makes origami figures that refer to Deckard's behavior. When he tries to reject his duty as Blade Runner, Gaff crafts a chicken to reprimand him and point out his cowardice. When Deckard is about to meet Rachel, Gaff crafts a man with an erection, as if predicting Deckard will feel attracted to her. After Deckard retires the androids and is hinted he'll most likely be requested to kill Rachel too, Deckard returns to his apartment and finds a third origami figure, meaning Gaff was in his apartment, but didn't kill Rachel. Rather, he gave Deckard an opportunity to escape the city with her. Finally, there's the figure itself. Earlier, when Deckard is alone playing the piano in his house for a moment, he pictures something in his mind. A unicorn running wildly across a forest. And when he finds the origami figure left by Gaff, it's a unicorn. Meaning Gaff knows his memories, because they were implanted in his mind and are therefore artificial. Many things in the story insinuate Deckard is most likely an android, but all of them are also very questionable. While Ridley Scott's intention is evident, the entire remaining cast doesn't seem to agree with the definitive side of the theory, and since many of them had an important part in the making of the film, their opinions and ideas deserve consideration.
I don't know. I still don't know. That is an enigma.
No, I never thought he was a replicant. No, that's never in my mind.
I think Deckard is a real guy, and I think he's in pain for it, and he knows he's going to live a long time and, like, suffer.
Yes, of course he is. Otherwise, the movie doesn't make sense. You don't need just one more super intelligent detective, hunting these people down. Bryant calls him in deliberately. He's a replicant, and they all know it except Deckard.
I know that Ridley wanted him to be, but I think that's kind of like a joke. And that's where the unicorn came from.
In the end, the answer to the question remains ambiguous. I personally think whether or not Deckard is an android or a human is irrelevant. if he is a human, then his entire journey shows a man who's being torn apart by grief and sorrow after realizing he's killing innocent creatures who just wanted to live in a world that has become less and less human. If Deckard is an android, then by gaining genuine empathy for other life forms, he has become so complex and human-like that comparing him to biological humans is now pointless. So the ambiguity of the answer is brilliant. The film constantly points out how artificial life is just as valuable as biological life, and how the origin of those life forms is irrelevant. So knowing whether or not Deckard is an android is not the point. What matters is that he is alive, even if it's not eternal.
It's too bad she won't live. But then again, who does?
He now understands what a life ends means. Is the complete vanishing of a unique, irreplaceable individual into oblivion. It took the lives of androids to show him how precious life is.